Well, hello and welcome to NICU Parent Network's Friday feature, Let's Talk About Race. I'm Keira Sorrells, the Executive Director and founder of NICU Parent Network, and I'm joined today by one of our longtime members, Yamile Jackson. So over the last year since we started these first Friday of the month conversations about race and racism in the U.S., we've covered things like bias and microaggressions, the language of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And, we always want to have a focus on how you can bring all of this information to your work as a NICU parent leader and to your organization and community. And we have placed a heavy focus on the experiences of Black Americans in US NICUs. And today we're going to shift just a little bit and really just begin to scratch the surface on another underserved community, our Latin NICU families. So Gigi is off in Germany this week with our colleagues at the European Foundation for the Care of Newborn Infants. So Yamile has graciously stepped in to sit down and have a chat with me today. And for those of you who don't know Yamile, she is the mother of Zachary, who was a micro-preemie born 22 years ago. I can't even believe that.
Me either.
She's also the founder of Kangaroo Care Day. She is an engineer, an advocate, an inventor, a longtime NPN member, really almost since our very, I think our second summit in 2012. And just, an all around amazing human. So thank you so much, Yamile, for being with me today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's exciting.
So let's start off and just get to know you a little bit more because you grew up in Colombia and you spent how much of your life there? Over 20 years?
21 years.
21 years.
I was 20. I was the age of Zachary now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And so what brought you to the US?
I always wanted to do a PhD in engineering, and it was not available in Colombia. So that's the reason that I came. And then I stayed for 1,000 other reasons, but the reason that brought me here, and the first time was being able to do my master's and then my PhD in engineering. My mom has a PhD, and she's 86, 87 now. So for me to have a mom that was not only educated but had a PhD, that's what made me want to have a PhD as well.
And I think it's really, what I really love about your story is how your engineering degree played into your NICU experience. So can you talk a little bit about that, just a little bit about Zachary's birth? And, you actually had to live through a hospital evacuation, basically keeping him alive with your own hands. So tell us a little bit about his birth, his NICU experience, and then again, like how that engineering background came into play for you.
Yeah, so engineers are problem solvers, and that's pretty much what you're trying to do. I have 4 engineering degrees. I have a bachelor's, 2 masters, and a PhD. And I had finished my PhD when Zachary was born. My concentration is in ergonomics and human factors. So that is the most human branch of engineering. So it's looking at the people and see how they interact with the environment. You probably have heard about ergonomic chairs. So it studies, the person in the workplace. What engineering helped me was to see my son's environment in the NICU, the relationship of him with the equipment, with the nurses, with me, with my husband, and figured out what needed to be improved. So, for example, one of the things that that came to very, very early in my NICU experience was a question that I asked the nurse what is one of the common denominators of these babies when they grow? And she said they don't want to be touched. So the way that my brain worked, we started looking at why and what would cause that, and how do we prevent it from happening to Zach? Because I'm Hispanic, we touch, human contact has been very important for me because I'm Hispanic, and so I ask, is it something that they don't develop? Or is it like every other human, we learn by association? And every time we touch him, it hurts. Excuse me. And she said, we don't know. It's nothing that we can research. It's impossible to know, basically. And so I was like, okay, I want evidence of one. Right. So I started talking with nurses, doctors. I know, from various, like flu shot that the parents said, the tech or the nurse says, relax, because if you relax, it will hurt less. So my job was to relax Zach, and how do we find ways to relax them that didn't involve medication or invasive procedures or anything that we can do it from the mom's perspective, that is from me. So engineering has always been in my right here in my forehead. Whether I know it or not, it is my education, is the way that I live, is the way that I approach problems. And for me, it was, we have a problem, we need to solve it, and I know how to solve it. So I changed my career from being a consultant in the oil and gas business to do what I like to do, which is helping moms and babies and dads.
I mean, what an amazing just, combination of bringing your culture, like you talked about, touch is very important.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Huge.
So I always think if I was probably not Hispanic, I wouldn't be what I'm doing right now. If my husband were the one with the engineering degree, his experience was totally different from mine.
Oh, really?
So yeah, he was working all day. He couldn't be there all the time. And for me being there all the time, that I could, because I was kicked out at the end of the day, very nicely. You gotta go home.
Right. You have to take care of yourself to some degree.
But the experiences are very different. The experience of a mom is different than a mom. The maternal instinct, it was very palpable from the time he was born. And so all that combined, like you mentioned, the flood we had, when Zachary was 3 weeks old, we had a flood in Houston that shut down the hospital, and we kept him alive pretty much by touch for 9 hours until he was evacuated. And in those dark hours is when I made a promise to Zach that his pain and struggle to survive were not in vain, and that I would do anything that I could to help babies like him and families like ours. So that's what I'm doing still 20 years later, 21, 22 years. Yeah, he'll be 22 in May.
Wow. And I just want to share a comment that we have from Team Noah. They said, love the Zachy. Still have my sons nearly 14 years later. Shared it with a few friends who became NICU moms. Forever thank you to you, Yamile.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. The stories are amazing. We were able to, like, one of the projects that we did last year that we continue this year is we give the Zackies to 17 NICUs in Ukraine. Every baby has, had the Zachy. So that by itself is the ability to be able to do that, to calm them, to help them, to, have this sense of the mom always there, the dad, dads are, fighting, and moms are, having babies that are preemies. And we use them for babies that are not preemies as well. Babies that are, that have difficulty sleeping, babies that, you have to, they won't sleep unless you go around driving. So instead of doing that, you use the Zakis to calm them and to help them fall asleep.
Right.
In pediatric units, in cardiology units, in oncology, any kid that can't be held, we use the Zaki hugs, and then the Zaki sacks to babies up until they weigh about 15 pounds.
Yeah.
So, any babies with units with babies or at home.
Yeah. I just think it's so beautiful the way that you have combined your culture and something that's very natural to you and just instinctual and, I mean, in your blood, with the lens of your engineering education and also that, that parent maternal, instinct and bond and need to be able to touch and hold and be with your baby. I think it's just beautiful. When we have these conversations and Gigi and I are talking, she always says, I don't speak for all Black families. And I know that you don't speak for all Latin families, but there are definitely some experiences that are more prevalent for families when English is not their first language. Now, you obviously, having been in the United States for a long time, you're completely fluent. But ahead of today, I was doing a little research and I was really shocked at the lack of research and papers specific to the experiences of Latin families in the NICU. So often it seems that Latin and Black families are kind of lumped together when we read statistics about non-white families and non-white NICU families. And I would love to just talk a little bit about those barriers that are most likely unique to Latin families or other families where language isn't their first language, where English isn't their first language. You and I were talking about communication and how even in your NICU experience and in some of your personal experiences just with, friends who are in the hospital, that the translation services aren't always the best.
Well, first we need to see if there is a translation service. And what kind of translation services are they? Are they like Google Translate, or is it like a person that actually knows? Because you don't have to only be a translator and interpreter, you have to be a medical translator and interpreter.
Right.
So it's they are difficult to find, but there are companies that offer that service. But when I was in the NICU, that didn't exist. And there are many hospitals where they can't afford it, or they don't see it, or they don't feel the need, or whatever reason, they don't have a translation service. But I remember translating for other moms. Like they would call and I was like, how would they do if I'm not here? How do they do it? Because they're just calling to see, babies were in where I was, moms were 3 hours away. It's not like they could come every night or something. I mean, they were bringing babies from all over, the area from Texas. And so when they call, sometimes it was like the janitors that would try to translate. Or me, but I had to start with, I'm just another mom. I'm not a translator, but I'll do the best to do, I think you need to understand that I'm not a translator. So even if you know English and Spanish, you not necessarily can translate, medical terms or anything like that. The best way is, to have the staff to reflect the population of the people, have people that speak Spanish, have nurses that speak Spanish, even if it's just one that can help, and just, welcome the families in their own language, when possible. Obviously, if you come from a town that has a super, weird, or not weird, but different language or dialect, you're not going to have everybody from everywhere, but definitely Spanish is probably one of the most spoken languages and in the US other than English. And I think it's probably the most doable, probably with maybe French, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so NICU experience is really difficult for people that understand the language. Imagine how difficult it would be for people that don't understand the language.
Right. That's a really
So
good point, because we talk about just barriers in communication in general in the NICU.
exactly.
All of
When they both speak English.
when we all speak English. Exactly. It's, the medical jargon and the machines and the acronyms and that's when you have, an English speaking team and an English speaking family. You and I both have a colleague that had her NICU baby overseas in a hospital that only had one physician that spoke some English and some. And she, I remember her telling us that in order for her to understand anything about her child, she would have to take pictures of the medical records and take those back, like an hour away to a cafe that had Wi-Fi and send those pictures to, a friend in the US that could translate. And I mean, it really, hearing it from an English speaking person's perspective, it really hit home and made me realize, wow, this is so much more than, not being able to ask, where, I don't know, where the lounge is or where the cafeteria is. I mean, this is your baby. This isn't, not being able to understand or know. And it's got to be so isolating.
Right. So one of the things that I feel that is the most challenging for the staff in the NICU is to evaluate where the parent is and speak to them at that level. So for example, like being an engineer, I ask a lot of questions. I ask a lot of questions about numbers, probabilities, all that. But there might be another person that comes and they don't care about the numbers. They just care about, how is my baby doing? How, what is happening? But they don't care about the numbers. So to be able to, talk to that parent in their level, that's one of the most challenging things to do. And I don't, I there are nurses that do it really nicely. They talk in the level that they're going to be understood. They layman terms. But if they have a neonatal nurse that is having a preemie, then they talk in another level because they already know all the labels and all the acronyms and everything like that. So, but for even some people know English, but they don't know like me. I mean, I knew English and I knew nothing about any of the terms that they were saying. Anything that I was like totally clueless. I remember one of my best memories in the NICU was when the neonatologist came to my room after I delivered Zach. And he sat down and he said, "I will not leave the room until you tell me you don't have any more questions." And that was amazing. Now, he probably knew that I didn't know enough to ask any questions. But the fact that he said that and the fact that he sat down and he said, ask me anything. That was something that I always recommend doctors or nurses to do is take the time, sit with them, don't stay standing, just, be at the level. If they're standing, stand. If they're sitting, sit. But, always have some compassion from where they are. Don't label them. Don't, don't discriminate. It's,
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about, biases and labels before, and some of those biases that non-English speaking families may face are that they're illegal, that, they're probably, I mean, I don't know what other kind of biases Latin families may come across, but it's certainly become.
I can tell you several.
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah. Well, one, that Hispanics don't speak English,
Right.
or that we don't speak enough or well enough. The other one is that we invade personal space, which we do.
Mhm.
I never knew what personal space meant until I moved to the US. Like, there's no personal space. We're close to each other. There's not a lot of space in Colombia, so we all together. It's okay to be, so close. So, that don't take, like, if somebody is so close to you, or if somebody is talking to you and they touch you, don't take that bad. Just, maybe tell them, or walk back, because I didn't know, like, I this actually happened to me. We were in a meeting. We were a lot of people looking at one drawing or something, and this is when I learned about personal space. So the guy said to me, "You're so close, I don't know if I should hug you." And I'm like, but he was like, everybody was close to each other. So I was like, what do you mean? And then I went to his office. I'm like, what did you mean? And he said, well, Hispanics are there, just stay away from one arm. But, if you didn't have the experience I had, or if you don't have the, go back to them and say, what did you mean?
Right.
They're not going to know. So, who is going to tell someone you're being too close to me?
Right.
So we get close. Yes. I try not to, but that's one thing that Hispanics have. I mean, another thing that happened to me was, they, in the NICU, they had meetings with other parents, and I didn't go to them because I didn't want to take time from being with Zach for, to go do other activities. And I think I was, I had my support system outside the NICU. And so I think that, maybe, that I was told one time that I was too arrogant because I didn't want to go to the meetings, or the meetings were, beneath me or something. And I was like, no, I mean, I think if you have meetings, if you have, sessions for, scrapbooking or anything like that, make it optional, and don't judge those that don't want to do it.
Right.
Because, my support system was outside the NICU.
Right.
So I didn't want to go to a meeting and everybody talked about their babies, and if their baby is doing really well and is going home, I'll feel bad because mine is not.
Yeah.
And if mine is the one doing well, I feel bad because the person next to me, the baby's not doing that well.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I said, I don't want to go. And just, the majority respected me, and they said, is this available for you if you want to do it? But, don't judge if you don't want to go.
Right. Absolutely. And I would imagine as well. I mean, again, just, we've talked before about the importance of seeing yourself in
Right.
that
Absolutely.
materials. And if you're the only non-English speaking family in a group, that would probably not feel as supportive as it may feel for others. And it is about just respecting the cultural differences, respecting just the human differences.
Right. One of the things that we offer in the kangaroo.care website, which is all about Kangaroo Care Day, is free resources for hospitals, and everything we have it in English, and the majority, if not all of them, are in English and Spanish and French, because we want them to print them and give it to the parent in the language that they speak the best.
Right.
Hopefully later we're going to do more languages, but But it's important that they can read in their own language. They can talk to someone in their own language, that somebody just asks them. That's another thing, if they don't speak the language, the only time people are going to talk to them is about medical things. Like, nobody's going to ask them, hey, how are you doing? Is there something that I can help you with? Like, is there something, there is not this sense of community that a lot of parents feel when they're in the NICU.
Yes,
So isolation is what you mentioned, and I think is very, very true.
Yeah. And Team NOAA just posted, accessible communication is imperative for connections in the NICU. And that's so right. I think, one of the things that we hear, and certainly was true for my experience in the NICU as well, was just the relationship building with the staff really enabled me to trust, what they were saying. It helped me trust that when I wasn't there, that my babies were, safe and loved and cared for. And so not being able to build that, I think, would make it just even more challenging for families. I think, some of the things that I've seen a lot of our NPN members, they've been really great about adding that bilingual staff to their support teams, so that those families, at least that they're
absolutely
that they cover, are able to build those relationships. And also, that staff person is also able to help facilitate the relationship building with the NICU team. It's just, there's so many different ways to connect and communicate. And like Team NOAA says, making that communication accessible is.
I'm so happy Team NOAA is here.
So
yeah.
Well, Yamile, I know this is something we could continue to talk about, and we'll definitely have more conversations about as we talk about, other underserved communities in the NICU and how they're affected. But I think, it's just opening up our lens to better understand the experiences of others is what's going to help us all move forward, I think. Is there anything else that you want to add for, any organization leader that might be listening or watching later?
Like in NPN, we are several that speak Spanish. And I think just talking with each of us and just ask, because everybody had a different experience. Everybody has a different educational level. Everybody has been in the US for different number of times. Some of them were born here. So the experiences are different. But just be open. And it's not, what we ask from people about Hispanics or Latin is not different than we ask about different religions or different genders or different levels of, work or experience or the age or anything. I mean, it's just being inclusive of everyone.
Exactly.
And know that everybody's suffering. That's the thing. I mean, if you're a mom in the NICU, they're suffering.
Right.
So be a little bit more compassionate, and support them where they are.
Right. I think that's a beautiful way to end, to support them where they are, and just to remember that common thread that we have as NICU families. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. It's always wonderful to spend some time with you. And we thank you for listening. We've got one more comment from Team NOAA that I want to make.
I love it.
Thank you, Team NOAA, for joining and being so interactive. So Team NOAA says, I used to work as a family support coordinator. I started a Tiny Tots book club for babies in the NICU. And in year 2 of the program, I made sure to only buy and give books that were bilingual. It was a small way for parents to have a typical experience with their baby. I love that, Team NOAA.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, I remember when I was in the NICU, I was giving a book in Spanish.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of books that are available in Spanish. Do look at, somebody looking to see what the book is about. before you give it. But yeah,
Understand the
definitely,
content, right?
definitely.
Sure.
So, oh my goodness, I'm so happy. I didn't know I could see the notes as well.
Oh, good. Good, good,
So thank you, Team Noah, for loving the Zaki. Oh my God,
good.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great.
Thank
All
you.
right.
All right. Well, everybody have a wonderful, beautiful weekend, and we'll be back the first Friday of April with Geeky to continue this discussion series. Thank you so much, and thank you for all you do, Yamile. It's so great to see
Thank
you.
you. Thank you for inviting me, and thanks for Team Noah to coming, and Sherry more too.
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Thank
All right.
you.
Take care,
Bye
everybody.
bye.